Imagine waking up one day and finding out that somewhere across the Atlantic Ocean, a complete stranger has been eating your face. Not metaphorically, not in a dream, literally printing out photographs of your face, sitting down at a table, and consuming them, one by one, every single day for nearly 3 months straight. 80 days, 80 meals, 80 pictures of the same man's face, chewed up and swallowed with what can only be described as terrifying dedication. Now imagine you only find out about this while you're standing on a red carpet, surrounded by cameras and reporters, lights flashing from every direction, and someone leans in and casually says, "Hey, by the way, the girl who eats your face is here tonight." You would stop. You would blink. You would question every single decision that led you to this moment in your life. And that is exactly what happened to one of Hollywood's biggest rising stars. A man so charming, so ridiculously good-looking, that somewhere in London, a woman decided the best way to get his attention was not to send a letter, not to show up to a fan event, not to slide into his DMs, but to eat him, one printed photograph at a time. And the story does not stop there. Because behind the laughter, behind the wild headlines, there are layers to this story that nobody is talking about. Layers that touch on obsession, on fame, on the dangerous blurred line between admiration and something far more unsettling. We are going to break all of it down today. And by the time this video is over, you are going to see this story in a completely different light. But first, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now and smash that bell icon so you never miss a story like this. We drop content that the mainstream media is too afraid to go deep on. Now let's get into it. His name is Glen Powell. And if you have been living under a rock for the past 2 years, here is your crash course. Glen Powell is a 37-year-old actor from Austin, Texas, who spent over a decade quietly grinding through Hollywood, small roles, forgettable cameos, bit parts in movies you have seen but cannot quite remember him in. He showed up in Scream Queens. He had a role in Spy Kids 3D, of all things, when he was barely a teenager. He floated through the industry for years, always handsome, always charming, always on the edge of something bigger, but never quite breaking through. And then came Top Gun, Maverick in 2022, and everything changed. Glen Powell played Hangman, the arrogant, cocky fighter pilot with a jawline carved from marble and a swagger that made audiences across the world collectively lose their minds. He was not even the lead. He was a supporting character. But he walked away from that film as arguably the most talked about person in it. The internet did not just like Glen Powell after Top Gun. The internet became obsessed with Glen Powell. And when the internet becomes obsessed with someone, what follows is not always pretty. Now let's talk about what actually happened, because the details of this story are more bizarre than the headlines let on. Glen Powell sat down with The Hollywood Reporter on May 20th, 2026, for their Comedy Actors Roundtable, a prestigious sit-down that also included Harrison Ford, Riz Ahmed, Owen Wilson, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, and Zach Braff. Big names. Serious company. The kind of interview that is meant to be thoughtful, reflective, career-defining. And then Glen Powell opened his mouth and told the world about the woman in London who has been eating his face every day for 80 days straight. His exact words were that there is a woman in London who has been printing out pictures of his face for the last 80 days and has eaten his face every single day. And she is not doing it quietly, in private, like some kind of secret ritual. She is doing it as a campaign, a negotiation, a hostage situation where Glen Powell's career opportunities are the ransom. Because according to Glen, she is eating his face every day until he gives her a role in a movie. Let that sink in. This is not a fan letter. This is not a petition. This is performance art meets extreme fandom meets. If we are being completely honest, a genuinely alarming level of fixation on another human being. But here is where it gets even more surreal. Glen found out about this woman not through a publicist, not through a security briefing, not through a concerned email from his management team. He found out on a red carpet, while the cameras were rolling, while the woman was standing right there. He recalled the moment with the kind of stunned disbelief that only a person who has lived it can properly convey. Security or someone on his team leaned over and told him, in the middle of the chaos of a red carpet event, that the girl who eats his face was in attendance. His response was essentially, "What on earth are you talking about?" Because this was the first he was hearing of it. 80 days of face eating, and nobody thought to mention it to him sooner. He reportedly called it a real liability, and honestly, he is not wrong. The fact that this woman managed to get onto a red carpet, into the same physical space as Glen Powell, while actively conducting what can only be described as an edible harassment campaign, is a genuine security question that deserves a serious answer. How did she get access? Glen himself has said he still does not know. And that unknown is arguably the most chilling part of the entire story. Now, some of you might be laughing right now. And that is a completely understandable reaction. There is something undeniably absurd about this story on its surface. A woman eating printed photographs of a celebrity's face. It sounds like a bit from a comedy sketch, and Glen told it with the energy of someone who has learned to find the humor in the horrifying. But let's pump the brakes for a second and really examine what is actually going on here, because when you strip away the comedy, what you are left with is a portrait of parasocial obsession that has reached a point of genuine concern. 80 days is not a one-time strange impulse. 80 days is a commitment. 80 days is a routine. 80 days means this woman woke up every single morning, printed out a photograph of Glen Powell's face, and ate it. Rain or shine, weekday or weekend. That level of daily ritual around a celebrity who does not know you exist. A celebrity you are using as a bargaining chip in a one-sided negotiation for a film role. That is not quirky fandom. That crosses into territory that mental health professionals would take seriously. And yet this story is being reported almost entirely as entertainment. As a fun, bizarre anecdote from a charming Hollywood actor at a roundtable interview. The woman is not being named. Glen is laughing about it. The world is chuckling along. But somewhere in London, there is a real person who has built 80 days of her life around the act of consuming an image of another human being. That is a story worth sitting with for a moment, beyond the punchline. Glen Powell is not a stranger to intense fan behavior. This roundtable interview was not the first time he has had to address the kind of attention his face generates. Attention that sometimes tips from adoration into something more complicated. Earlier in his rising fame, another fan asked him to sign a photograph that he immediately recognized as a family picture. One that, in his own words, there is no way the fan should have had access to. Think about what that means for a moment. Someone had tracked down a private family photograph of Glen Powell and brought it to him for an autograph. That is not something that happens through normal channels. That is someone going to extraordinary lengths to obtain something deeply personal. And Glen noticed. He called it out. But what do you do with that? What do you say to someone who is holding something that intimate, something they should not have, waiting for your signature like it is the most normal thing in the world? This is the reality of fame in the social media age. The walls between a public figure and their private life have never been thinner. Every photograph, every candid moment, every slip of personal information gets collected, shared, archived, and sometimes weaponized by people who feel a connection to a celebrity that the celebrity has never consented to and is entirely unaware of. Glen Powell became famous fast, faster than most, and the intensity of that fame brought with it a particular kind of audience attention that is both the engine of his success and a genuine source of ongoing unease. Let's talk about The Running Man, because that film is a massive part of why Glen Powell is sitting at that Hollywood Reporter roundtable table. And it is a film that has its own set of themes that feel uncomfortably relevant to this whole conversation. Glen Powell stars in the remake of the classic 1987 Arnold Schwarzenegger action film, playing a man who becomes a contestant on a deadly game show in a dystopian future where entertainment and violence are fused together, where audiences cheer for blood, and where the line between spectacle and humanity has completely dissolved. It is a film about what happens when public obsession with a person becomes something predatory. It is a film about being watched, about being consumed. The parallels to Glen Powell's real life right now are not subtle. The man is literally starring in a movie about being hunted for entertainment while simultaneously being the subject of a woman who has made consuming him a daily practice. Sometimes life writes the metaphors for you. The Running Man remake is one of the most anticipated films of 2026. Edgar Wright is directing it, and the early buzz out of preview screenings has been strong. Glen Powell has spoken about how physically demanding the role was, how much preparation went into it, and how the themes of the original film feel even more relevant today than they did in 1987, when the book by Stephen King was first adapted. In an era of reality television that has only gotten more extreme, in a culture where viral moments are manufactured and consumed and discarded at a rate that would have been unimaginable 40 years ago, a story about society's hunger to watch real people suffer for entertainment hits very differently. And now you have Glen Powell, star of that film, sitting across from a reporter and describing a fan who has turned the act of consuming his image into a daily performance. One designed to attract his attention, to force a response, to turn her obsession into a transaction. The parallels are almost too on the nose to be accidental. But beyond the film, beyond the weird poetic symmetry of it all, what does this story tell us about where celebrity culture is heading? Because Glen Powell is not an anomaly. He is a data point in a much larger trend. The intensity of fan behavior around certain celebrities has been escalating for years. We have watched it with Taylor Swift, whose fans, fiercely devoted, brilliantly organized, and occasionally frightening, have been involved in incidents ranging from the heartwarming to the genuinely dangerous. We have watched it with Harry Styles, with Timothée Chalamet, with Pedro Pascal, with any man or woman who crosses a certain threshold of cultural visibility and becomes, in the eyes of a particular subset of the internet, something more than human, an idea, a projection, a vessel for feelings that have nowhere else to go. The face-eating story went viral within hours of the interview being published, and the reaction online was fascinating to watch. The majority of responses were exactly what you would expect. Jokes, memes, people tagging their friends and saying things like "this is so her." The internet normalized it almost instantly. Because we have been conditioned to normalize escalating fan behavior. We have been conditioned to find it charming, harmless, funny. We call it stan culture, and we celebrate it. We make merchandise. We build entire communities around it. And somewhere in the process, we lost the ability to recognize when something has gone too far. 80 days of eating photographs of a person's face has gone too far. But it took a Hollywood Reporter roundtable to surface it, and even then it was treated as a fun anecdote rather than what it actually is, which is a concerning pattern of behavior that someone probably needs help with. Now let's pivot to some breaking developments that connect to this story and give it even more context, because Glen Powell's moment in the cultural spotlight is not happening in a vacuum. There is a much bigger conversation happening right now about the relationship between fame, parasocial connection, and mental health, and it is getting louder. Just recently, multiple mental health researchers and celebrity management professionals have begun speaking publicly about what they are calling the parasocial crisis in entertainment. The rise of platforms like TikTok and Instagram has fundamentally changed how fans relate to celebrities. Where once a fan might have admired someone from a distance, through magazine covers, movie posters, televised appearances, they now have the illusion of direct access. They see what celebrities eat for breakfast. They watch them argue with people in comment sections. They follow their location through tagged posts. They feel, genuinely and deeply feel, that they know these people, that they have a relationship with them. And when reality fails to confirm that feeling, when the celebrity does not respond to messages, does not acknowledge the fan's existence, does not give them the role in the movie they are eating photographs to earn, that disconnect can manifest in ways that are increasingly difficult to predict and increasingly difficult to manage. Glen Powell is currently one of the most followed and discussed actors on social media in the world. His posts routinely generate millions of interactions. His face, his jawline, his general existence as a physically attractive and charismatic human being has become a kind of cultural currency, something people project onto, argue about, meme into infinity. And for most of those millions of people, that engagement is harmless. They watch his movies, they follow his Instagram, they enjoy the parasocial experience of feeling like they know him a little. But for a smaller number, and in a world of hundreds of millions, even a small percentage is a very large number. That engagement crosses a line. And the face-eating story is one very visible, very public example of where that line gets crossed. What is particularly interesting about this specific case is the performative nature of it. The woman in London is not hiding. She is not doing this in secret. She is documenting it, presumably. Otherwise, how would word have spread far enough to reach the red carpet where Glen was standing? There is an audience for her ritual. She is performing her devotion to Glen Powell for an audience of her own, which means this has become a kind of theater within a theater. A fan so consumed by a celebrity that she has become a celebrity of her own in niche corners of the internet, famous for the act of eating Glen Powell's face. The layers of public performance and private obsession are folded into each other so tightly at this point that it is genuinely difficult to untangle. And Glen's response to all of this, his decision to tell the story publicly, with humor, in one of the most high-profile interview formats in Hollywood journalism, is itself worth examining. He could have kept it private. He could have instructed his team never to discuss it. But he chose to tell it, at a roundtable with Harrison Ford, to the Hollywood Reporter. On the record, that is a choice. And it is a choice that simultaneously humanizes him. Look how relatable I am, look how I laugh at the absurd reality of my fame, and amplifies the behavior it describes. By telling the story publicly, Glen Powell has guaranteed that more people know about the face-eating fan, which might encourage more people to try increasingly extreme stunts to get his attention. The feedback loop of celebrity and obsession churns on, and everyone is playing their role in it, perhaps without fully recognizing the mechanics at work. Let's also talk about what Glen Powell said in that same Hollywood Reporter interview about something else, because the roundtable touched on multiple fascinating topics that have been somewhat overshadowed by the face story. In that same sitting, Glen opened up about the realities of navigating Hollywood as someone who rose very quickly from relative obscurity to genuine A-list status. He talked about the industry in ways that were candid and, for an actor at his level of success, surprisingly unguarded. He was in the room with Harrison Ford, one of the most iconic, most bankable, most enduringly beloved stars in the history of cinema, and Riz Ahmed, who is himself one of the most critically respected actors of his generation. That is a room full of very different kinds of success, and Glen Powell, the youngest and perhaps most internet-famous of the group, sat right in the middle of it. There is a generational dimension to this story that is easy to miss. Glen Powell's fame is fundamentally different from Harrison Ford's fame. Harrison Ford became Han Solo and Indiana Jones in an era when the relationship between a star and their audience was mediated almost entirely through studio press teams, magazine interviews, and the films themselves. The audience knew what Ford chose to show them. Glen Powell became Glen Powell in an era when the algorithm decides what the audience sees, when a candid video shot outside a coffee shop can get more views than a trailer, when fan edits and memes and parasocial communities shape a celebrity's image as powerfully as any publicist. The machinery of fame has changed so completely in one generation that it is almost impossible to compare the experience. And the behavior it produces in audiences has changed accordingly. Harrison Ford, sitting across the table from a man whose fan base includes someone who eats his face daily, must have found the entire conversation at least mildly bewildering. This is not the Hollywood Ford came up in. This is not the relationship with the public that defined his era. This is something new and strange, and still not fully understood by anyone, including the celebrities at the center of it. Now, in terms of what is coming for Glen Powell professionally, because amidst all the surreal fan behavior, he is still one of the hardest working and most in-demand actors in the industry right now. The upcoming months are absolutely stacked. The Running Man is tracking for enormous box office numbers. His television work on Chad Powers, the Hulu comedy series in which he plays a disgraced quarterback who disguises himself to walk onto a college football team, was well received and demonstrated something very important. That Glen Powell has genuine comedic timing, not just action hero charisma. He is not a one-trick actor. He is building a career with real range, and the industry is taking notice. His Golden Globes nomination in January 2026 for Best Performance by a male actor for Chad Powers signaled that the awards conversation around him is only going to grow. But here is the thing about all that success, all that momentum, all that cultural heat. It is jet fuel for exactly the kind of fan behavior we have been discussing. The bigger Glen Powell gets, the more intense the attention becomes. The more intense the attention becomes, the more the outliers push further to stand out within it. The woman in London who eats his face is, in her own strange way, just trying to be seen in a sea of millions of people who are all competing for the attention of the same man. She has made herself unforgettable. She has achieved her goal. Glen Powell knows she exists now. The entire world knows she exists now. Whether that is what she intended or something she is unprepared for is another question entirely. And this brings us to the final thing worth examining in all of this. The question of what we owe each other in the space between fandom and humanity. Glen Powell is a public figure who chose a life of visibility. He chose to be an actor, to pursue fame, to place himself in the cultural arena. And with that choice comes certain realities, including the reality that some portion of the people who watch your work are going to develop relationships with your image that go places you never intended and would never sanction. That is not new. That has been true of every famous person in human history, going back long before motion pictures or social media or any of the machinery of modern celebrity. But the scale is new. The tools are new, and the behaviors those tools enable are, in some cases, genuinely unprecedented. What we owe Glen Powell and every other person who exists in the public eye is the basic recognition that they are human beings, not images to be consumed, not characters in our own personal narratives, not bargaining chips in a campaign for attention. What we owe the woman in London and anyone else whose relationship with a celebrity has tipped into something that worries the people around them is not mockery. It is the understanding that parasocial obsession is a real psychological phenomenon, one that can escalate, one that deserves compassionate attention rather than viral humiliation. And what we owe ourselves as consumers of content, as participants in the attention economy, as people who click and share and repost and amplify, is the ongoing practice of asking what we are really engaging with when we engage with stories like this. Are we laughing at something funny? Or are we watching a symptom of something serious and choosing to call it entertainment because that is easier? Glen Powell is going to be fine. He is charming, he is talented, he is surrounded by professionals, and he has the resources to manage the realities of his fame. The Running Man will open to massive numbers. He will give more roundtable interviews. He will continue to be one of the most discussed faces in Hollywood. And he will probably tell the face-eating story again, because it is a genuinely extraordinary story, and he tells it well. But somewhere in London, there is a woman who has turned 80 days of her life into an act of consumption directed at a man who does not know her. And that is a story with more weight to it than the headlines suggest. That is a story worth sitting with. That is a story that tells us something real about who we are becoming in an age where the boundaries between loving someone from a distance and losing yourself in that love have never been harder to find. Fame has always been a strange and distorting mirror. What Glen Powell's story shows us is just how strange it has gotten, and how much stranger it might still become.